Welcome to Wordplay, where we look at some of the best and worst examples of video games based on literature. Today we're looking at Star Wars: Shadows of the Empire on the N64. Both the game and the book it was based on were part of a multimedia project launched by Lucasfilm in 1996. The Shadows of the Empire project bridges the year-long gap between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. Along with the full-length novel and video game tie-in, they also made a comic book series, trading cards, and of course, lots of toys. The novel starts with Luke Skywalker and the others searching for Han Solo, who has been captured by fan-favorite bounty hunter Boba Fett. Things quickly get more complicated when Shizor, the head of a vast criminal syndicate called Black Sun, begins targeting Luke as part of a cat-and-mouse game between him and Vader. The novel, which became a bestseller, was written by Steve Perry. His other works include an ongoing series of sci-fi novels called the Matador series. The novel fills in some of the blanks left unanswered between episodes 5 and 6, like how the rebels intercepted the plans for the second Death Star. It also answers some questions that no one really asked, like where Leia got her bounty hunter disguise and thermal detonator. Written in a third-person limited style, the book frequently switches between the perspectives of different characters, and I do mean frequently. In the final showdown, when all of the main characters are together, the point of view actually changes 4 times in one page. The book also introduces a new character named Dash Rendar. He's a cocky smuggler who prides himself on his piloting skills. Sound familiar? As soon as we meet Dash in the novel, it's clear that he's just a stand-in for Han Solo, and a less likable one at that. I read some of the other Expanded Universe books when I was a kid, but this is the one that always felt the most like a real Star Wars experience. It's a fun, pulp adventure story that's worth checking out. A launch title for the Nintendo 64, the game was developed by LucasArts. It was one of the system's best sellers in 1997, and it was later ported to PC. You play as Dash through 10 levels, 5 of which take place before Dash's first appearance in the novel. The gameplay goes back and forth between third-person shooting and piloting different vehicles. Despite being based on a novel, the game kinda skimps on narrative. The story comes in the form of classic Star Wars text crawls and short slideshow cutscenes. These tell a heavily abridged version of the novel's story from the perspective of Dash. The biggest victim of this bare-bones approach to storytelling is the new characters. For example, we spent a lot of time in the novel learning about Shizor. He's established as a cunning strategist and criminal mastermind, the Star Wars equivalent of Professor Moriarty. He's a formidable, interesting villain who drives the entire story forward. But if you play the game without reading the novel, he's just that one green guy from the cutscenes, who might be the bad guy? The first 3 levels of the game take place long before the events of the book, during the Battle of Hoth. We start off strong with one of the best levels in the game, where you fly a snowspeeder. There are 4 levels where you're either piloting a vehicle or manning the guns, but it seems like there should be 5. In the book, there's a dogfight against an Imperial freighter, which proves to be a pivotal moment for Dash's character. But for some reason, they leave that scene out of the game entirely. The vehicle missions are definitely the most entertaining part of the game. Then there are the on-foot levels. Using Dash's blaster and various pickups, you shoot stormtroopers and navigate through the environment. The game has an auto-aim system that locks onto targets when you face them, but it often takes a second to work, and sometimes it gets very confused. Maneuvering and jumping feels really clumsy. Things get a bit better whenever you pick up a jetpack, but that only happens in a few levels. The sound design is quite good for the most part, though certain sound effects become a bit annoying through repetition. It has all the classic Star Wars music and sounds. They even have a Wilhelm scream for when someone falls off a ledge. The boss fights are kind of hit and miss here. On the one hand, there are some decent battles with characters and vehicles from the franchise. For instance, using a jetpack to fight against Boba Fett and his ship makes for a memorable boss, though the hitbox on the Slave One can be a bit wonky. On the other hand, there are a few really weak bosses that require almost no strategy at all. The worst example of this has to be the final boss of the game, who is just a generic robot. This final fight is really disappointing, because they could have easily raised the stakes by having you fight an actual character from the book. We could have faced off against the replica droid assassin Guri, or even Shizor in some kind of mech suit. Instead, we end the last third-person level with a Transformers toy knockoff. So after retrieving the Death Star plans, Dash heads to Coruscant to infiltrate Shizor's palace, which can only mean a sewer level. I know, that's how they get into the palace in the book. But a sewer level? Instead of a thrilling space battle against the freighter, we get one of the most played-out cliches in video games? Anyways, after all that, we get to the last level. I'm going to be getting into some spoilers for both the game and the novel here, so if you want to read or play them yourself, you can skip ahead by clicking the link on the screen. The last level puts you in control of Dash's ship, the Outrider, as he attacks Shizor's Skyhook. Flying inside the space station, you destroy the core, Death Star 2 style, and then the Skyhook explodes before Dash can make it out. And what happens in the book, you ask? Dash Rendar, who has been built up throughout the entire book as an ace pilot, supposedly crashes into some space debris and dies. This ending feels so much cheaper than the heroic sacrifice we see in the game. Of course, the game's secret ending and other stories in the expanded universe tell us that Dash faked his death in both of these cases, but that doesn't keep his death in the book from being extremely anticlimactic. The story in the game is almost non-existent, and the controls in the third-person levels are kind of a mess. The vehicle levels fare a bit better, but you could just play Rogue Squadron instead. If you're interested in the Shadows of the Empire project, you can just skip the game and read the book. Tune in for the next episode, where we'll be looking at a loose adaptation of a classical novella and asking ourselves the question, do you feel like a hero yet?